Polls for the general elections in Trinidad and Tobago officially closed at 6 p.m. local time, but voting continued as hundreds of people remained in line to cast their ballots. Roadblocks and protests have intensified in Bolivia following the postponement of the general elections and calling for the resignation of the de facto regime. Lebanon's Prime Minister announced the resignation of his government this Monday in the wake of the blasts in Beirut. From the headquarters of Teleso English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Trinidad and Tobago, where polls for the general elections officially closed at 6 p.m. local time, but voting continued as there were hundreds of people still lined up at some polling stations. According to observations by the candidates and people who went to the polls today, turnout was larger than the 2015 general election, when 67.27% of the electorate came out to vote. More than 1.1 million people were eligible to go to the polls this Monday. Local reports indicated that the long lines and slow pace of voting was the result of the social distancing and sanitising procedures adopted by the Elections and Boundaries Commission. 146 candidates representing 19 political parties, as well as 4 independents, are standing. The elected candidates will occupy the 41 seats in Parliament. The leader of the winning party will become Prime Minister. The ruling People's National Movement and the opposition United National Congress have the greatest chance of winning seats. Cuban health authorities reported the highest ever daily increase in COVID-19 cases since the beginning of the outbreak this Monday.
As a result of the analysis of these 4,267 samples yesterday, 93 people were diagnosed with the COVID-19 in our country, and with this test processed and the number of positive cases, we now have a total of 301,598 tests conducted, while 3,046 people have tested positive for COVID-19, which represents 1.01% of all the samples that have been analyzed.
Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez offered an update on COVID-19 cases this Monday, reporting 876 new locally transmitted cases and 119 imported cases.
We have to inform to the Venezuelan people that 876 new locally transmitted COVID-19 cases have been recorded in the last 24 hours in Venezuela, of which 306 were reported in the capital district, Caracas. 63% of cases have recovered from the virus. Of the 26,800 cases, only 9,641 cases remain active.
This Monday marks the one-year anniversary of the so-called Day of Fire in Brazil, which saw raging wildfires spread across the Amazon region, grabbing the world's attention. According to the National Institute for Space Research, 124 fires were registered on August 10, 2019, and 203 more were flagged the next day. Authorities said they were investigating reports that farmers in Pará State had called for a day of fire on August 10th to burn land for their use. Deforestation in the Amazon hit its highest level in a decade last year, and experts fear that the damage could be even worse this year, with many fires already ripping through the region. In Chile, a group of Mapuche people tried to occupy the municipal building in the Providencia district of the capital Monday morning in rejection of state violence against their communities. At least 10 Mapuche community members gathered in the district, where they attempted to occupy the building in support of Mapuche political prisoners who have been on hunger strike for more than 100 days, in rejection of racism and state violence against their communities. The protesters were violently repressed by police, with at least 2 members of the group arrested. Also in Chile, the Public Liberties Association is suing the government of Sebastián Piñera for police abuse during the widespread protests in the country. The association noted that a group of 22 people suffered eye injuries as a result of police repression during anti-government demonstrations between October 2019 and March 2020, and explained that a class action lawsuit had been filed before the 15th Civil Court in the city of Santiago. The lawsuit demands the state pay compensation of $8.7 million. According to data from the National Institute of Human Rights, about 3,400 people were injured, more than 8,000 were arrested, and 34 were killed in the violent police repression of the protests. I will be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Bolivia after the lack of answers on a definitive date for the general elections and demanding the resignation of de facto President Janine Áñez. Close to a week of protests, roadblocks and mobilizations organised by social movements and the Trade Union Federation in several regions of the country have continued and are especially strong in La Paz, Cochabamba and Santa Cruz. Meanwhile, the Bolivian Workers' Centre and rural movements assured that roadblocks will be maintained on 100 routes in the Andean region, despite the pressure and attacks of irregular groups against protesters. At least 60 demonstrators have been arrested and 40 remain in detention. And in the Bolivian city of El Alto, protesters blocked multiple roads while calling for the immediate resignation of all members of the de facto government and also condemning the postponement of the general elections, which had been set for September 6. Protesters also denounced the threats issued by the de facto authorities, as well as a plan to sell off the country's natural resources to foreign companies. Despite the deployment of troops in several of Bolivia's main cities, the demonstrations have grown across the country in the past week.
The de facto Interior Minister Arturo Murillo has threatened people in the city of El Alto, all the people, all our patriotic brothers. We do not want our national resources, including our oil, gas and lithium, to be stolen. We have got news on negotiations with Petrobras, negotiations taking place behind our backs.
The Director General of the World Health Organization has stressed that it is never too late to control a COVID-19 outbreak.
This week we will reach 20 million registered cases of COVID-19 and 750,000 deaths. Behind these statistics there is a great deal of pain and suffering. Every life lost matters. I know many of you are grieving and that this is a difficult moment for the world. But I want to be clear. There are green shoots of hope, and no matter where a country, a region, a city or a town is, it's never too late to turn the outbreak.
In the United States, COVID-19 infections continue to rise, with over 5.2 million cases now confirmed. The US is by far the worst affected country by the pandemic in the world. It has the highest COVID-19 death toll at more than 165,000. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump was accused of flouting the Constitution by unilaterally extending a virus relief package. The measures have been dismissed as unworkable, weak and far too narrow. And on Monday, Black Lives Matter in the US city of Chicago warned Mayor Lori Lightfoot that the renewed civil unrest in the city won't end until the safety and well-being of black communities is finally a priority. The stark warning came after police wounded a 20-year-old man during a shootout on Sunday afternoon, which led to a standoff between officers and residents lasting hours that at times grew violent. While police reported that the man fired at officers first, activists questioned the official police narrative. On Monday morning, Police Superintendent David Brown said the shooting led to a wave of overnight looting that resulted in 2 people being shot, over 100 arrests and 13 injuries to officers. However, while the official described the looting as pure criminality, Black Lives Matter Chicago said those involved were actually protesting. In a statement, the movement stressed when protesters attack high-end retail stores that are owned by the wealthy and service the wealthy, that is not our city and has never been meant for us. Spanish health authorities confirmed over 1,400 new coronavirus cases this Monday, bringing the total number to more than 300,000 since the outbreak of the pandemic in the country.
A total of 1,486 new cases have been diagnosed in the last 24 hours. 3,316 new cases have been reported in the last 7 days, continuing from when they began to show symptoms, bringing the total number of cases in Spain to 322,980 since the beginning of the epidemic.
Sun seekers flocked to beaches over the weekend as parts of Western Europe saw a heat wave. A day after the United Kingdom recorded its hottest August day in 17 years at 36.4 degrees Celsius, much of its southern coastline was packed with visitors, many of whom had been forced to abandon foreign holidays because of COVID-19 travel restrictions. There was a similar story across other parts of Europe where many residents endured weeks of lockdown earlier this year. No relief is expected until Wednesday, with the soaring temperatures leading to further pressure as the coronavirus outbreak worsens. Researchers warned this week that climate change would likely bring more hot weather to Europe. And at the Grand Place in Brussels, wearing a mask is compulsory even in high temperatures, which have been over 35 degrees Celsius. The Belgian Royal Weather Institute has issued a red alert to warn people about the soaring temperatures, which are expected to continue for 3 days.
Under this, the sun that's really so hot right now, it's just so hard to breathe, and especially that if you are like inside a building that has no AC, it's really just so uncomfortable. But looking around, most of the people here are wearing their mask, of course, to protect themselves and the others, but I mean, it's still like, it's hard. I know it's uncomfortable, but we are trying to protect each other. So that's a good thing, I guess. So.
Authorities in Mauritius declared an environmental emergency on Monday as oil continued to leak from a Japanese ship carrying thousands of tons of fuel. The ship ran aground on July 25th and began seeping oil last week, staining coral reefs, mangrove forests and tranquil lagoons in an unprecedented environmental catastrophe for the Indian Ocean nation. Salvage crews raced against time on Monday as the ship was at risk of splitting apart. Volunteer groups are also working to prevent further damage to coastal areas. Meanwhile, representatives of the Japanese company Nagashiki Shipping have apologised for the incident, noting action would be taken to protect the environment and mitigate the pollutant effects of the spill. Israeli security forces bombed an observation post of the Hamas resistance movement in the Gaza Strip on Monday. The occupying Israeli regime claimed the attack was in retaliation after Hamas launched explosive-laden balloons. Hamas representatives stressed that the latest attack by Israeli forces caused damage to several facilities, although no casualties have been reported so far. Residents of the Gaza Strip continue to denounce the Israeli attacks under all sorts of pretexts. Meanwhile, Palestinian resistance movements have vowed to improve their capacity to fight the Israeli occupation. We have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Actor from the south. Lebanese Prime Minister Hassan Diab addressed the nation this Monday, announcing his resignation and that of his government in the wake of the blast that hit Beirut last week. On confirming the decision, the Prime Minister criticised Lebanon's ruling political elite for fostering what he called an apparatus of corruption bigger than a state. Diab compared Tuesday's explosion to an earthquake that rocked the country, describing it as a disaster beyond measure. 3 cabinet ministers had already announced their resignations, along with 7 members of parliament, before those of the entire government were confirmed.
I declare today the resignation of this government. God save Lebanon. God save Lebanon. God save Lebanon. Long live the people.
And the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warned on Monday that Lebanon needs immediate assistance following the blast in Beirut last week.
A preliminary assessment by OCHA has determined that we need to address immediate response now and over the next 3 months. While assessments are ongoing, identified initial priority needs include assistance to help sustain emergency, intensive and specialized health care, shelter and expansion of protection assistance, including counseling and psychological support, support to basic water and sanitation, assistance to enable education activities to resume, and support to ease growing food insecurity among the most vulnerable.
The Central Electoral Commission of Belarus announced this Monday that current President Alexander Lukashenko secured over 80% of the vote following the presidential elections held on Sunday. Meanwhile, the main opposition candidate, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, won 9.9% of the vote, while the other three candidates failed to reach 2%. Opposition sectors took to the streets in the capital, Minsk, claiming there was electoral fraud and refusing to recognise the results. Meanwhile, the observation mission sent by the Commonwealth of Independent States announced that there were no violations observed in the electoral process. And Belarusian authorities announced on Monday that non-authorized demonstrations were under control following the presidential elections that took place on Sunday. The announcement was made by police authorities, who reported that at least 2 people were under arrest, while noting that official numbers would be published in the coming hours. Meanwhile, the Interior Ministry noted that the national police had been deployed across the country to guarantee public safety. President Lukashenko has stressed that intelligence reports reveal that the protests are being orchestrated from Poland, the United Kingdom and the Czech Republic, among others. Pakistan reopened its restaurants, cinemas and gyms as the number of coronavirus cases continues to drop. Pakistan is the 4th most affected nation by the novel coronavirus pandemic in the Asian continent. To date, the country has reported nearly 285,000 COVID-19 cases and over 6,000 deaths. On a positive note, the number of new daily cases has gone down, and health authorities have reported that more than 260,000 patients have recovered from the virus.
Most of the restaurants have opened and we have a good response to the grace of God, better than earlier. All the employees and businessmen are happy with the opening and that the government has ended the lockdown because coronavirus is controlled now. I came out because the weather is pleasant today and coronavirus is controlled, almost finished. It has no significant effects now, but we should take care because prevention is better than cure. One never knows about the bad time, so we have to take care of ourselves and should wear masks.
9 new Constitutional Court judges were sworn in Mali this Monday in an attempt to solve the ongoing political crisis in the country. The swearing-in ceremony held in the capital, Bamako, was attended by President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, who's been facing opposition demonstrations calling for his resignation for the past 2 months. The new appointments came after a suggestion made by the latest Economic Community of West African States mission to the country, which also called for the formation of a new unity government to include opposition figures. Mali has seen violent unrest following a decision by the Constitutional Court in April to overturn the results of the parliamentary elections for 31 seats, a move that saw candidates of President Keïta's party re-elected.
The objectives are the reason why the court was instituted, to try to meet expectations, political needs. But by the law, or only the law we know, we are fully aware today of what is at stake. We are fully aware today of the objectives assigned to us. But we are going to do it without passing. We are going to do it effectively, efficiently.
Kenyan health authorities offered an update on COVID-19 cases this Monday.
Today, we have 492 more COVID-19 infections out of a sample of 4,063 over the last 24 hours only. In total now, the confirmed numbers are 26,928, while the cumulative tests stand at 358,330. Among the new cases are some 478 are Kenyans, while 14 are foreigners.
According to a new form of measurement that goes beyond the lack of money, more than half of Kenya's population is living in poverty. On Monday, the director of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Zachary Makwangi, explained that the multi-dimensional index looks beyond income to include access to safe water, education, electricity, food and 6 other indicators. According to the new index, 23.4 million Kenyans, or 53% of the population, are multi-dimensionally poor, compared to 15.9 million if looking at income alone. The index is contained in the new Comprehensive Poverty Report produced by the Kenyan Bureau, UNICEF and UN Women. Treasury Cabinet Secretary Uko Yatani said that deprivation in housing, nutrition and sanitation were the 3 largest contributors to multidimensional poverty. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.